So up next, we have our final applied technical talk from Tegan Bunsu Ashby. Tegan is a software developer for the Philadelphia 76ers on the research and development team. We are very excited to learn about the intersection of data science and basketball. And just a quick reminder, please make sure you stay on mute and that your video is turned off. And if you have any questions throughout the talk, feel free to post in the chat and we can ask Tegan when she is done presenting. So Tegan, whenever you're ready, thank you for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Michelle. And I'm really excited to be here with you all for International Women's Day. I know this has been a long time coming, so
yes.
Finally, we're here. We made it.
We did. Yay. And we are so happy. International Women's Day, great way to celebrate. So thank you for joining, Tegan.
Awesome. All right. So today I wanted to talk to you all about one of the more visible and visual developments in professional basketball since data and data science started to play a bigger role in how we understand the game, and that is shot charts and the three-point shot. And I really like this topic personally because data visualization is probably my favorite part of my role next to working with my team. I'm lucky to work with 3 other extremely talented and brilliant data scientists, along with our director, another developer. But shot charts are just cool, and they seem to be something that almost everybody loves. Coaches love them, players love them. You'll find articles about them on ESPN. They're something that's special and unique to basketball. And I think that's because shot charts tell a story about data and trends that would otherwise feel abstract. And basketball as a game, in my opinion, is maybe the ultimate drama. I may be a little biased, but it seems fitting to tell you all today about one of the biggest disruptions in the game, how the three-point shot took over the NBA. So here's a quick roadmap for what we're going to cover today. I'll touch on the history of how we get our data and then get into shot charts as a visualization strategy. Then I'll talk a little bit about what we mean by this idea of efficiency in basketball analytics vis-a-vis shots. And then I'll dive into a couple examples of the types of stories that we can tell with shot charts. And the trick today is, which hopefully this will be fun, is that I'm going to do this without talking about any teams or players by name for secret reasons and just to be cautious as a representative of the Sixers and the front office. So let's get started with the pipeline. Basketball analytics is kind of new. Up until 1996, the best data that we had for describing what happens during a basketball game was the box score, which of course is still alive and well. The box score consists mainly of counting stats, the sort of stuff you can see, like how many points did you score? Were they for 2 or 3? Were they free throws? How many steals or rebounds? And because of this, it can be a bit limited. It captures only a fraction of what happens during a game because it's so heavily weighted towards the offense, and it can obscure or underweight the magnitude of a player's contribution, literally the other side of the ball. So that started to change in the 1996 to 1997 season when play-by-play data became available. So what falls under play-by-play? It's kind of like color commentary. It's talking about events and the players on both teams who are involved, like so-and-so rebounded the ball or so-and-so passed to so-and-so. But critically for our topic today, this is when we first start to get XY location data for plotting shots, shot distance, and location. Then in the 2013 to 2014 season, we got player tracking data, which is now provided by a company called Second Spectrum, which takes the event data of what's happening on court, the X, Y, and Z coordinates associated with events and player actions, using cameras installed in every NBA stadium. So to take the example of the pick and roll, one of the most popular actions in basketball, where a teammate puts his body in front of the defender who's guarding the player with the ball. This is the pick or the screen, so that the ball handler can move past the screen and either look to score or pass. And then the screener rolls to the basket or the rim and is open for a pass. This isn't captured at all in the box score. The play-by-play maybe captures some of the events like the pass, and player tracking, well, it gives us everything. For the on-court visualization work that I do for the Sixers, we use D3, which is a low-level JavaScript charting library for our stack-specific needs. Although I've seen plenty of incredible shot charts made in R, and at a base level, we take that location data associated with certain events and map it to court coordinates. But for today, all of the data I'll be using is available from simple play-by-play data and is publicly available from NBA Stats or basketball-specific stats website called Basketball Reference. So I've been talking a bit about shot charts, but we haven't really seen any yet. So let's go through a couple different types of shot charts and their visualization strategies. Here's a simple dot plot. You may have seen something like this if you've ever watched the broadcast of a basketball game. Maybe the unfilled circles are X's, maybe there are different color encodings to denote makes and misses, maybe the misses are red. There are a couple different ways to do it. But this chart is really great for creating a snapshot of a game, maybe for a player or for a specific team, but it quickly gets out of hand when you want to look at high volume shots, like maybe over the course of a season or several seasons. This is a heat or a contour plot. It's really awesome for showing the density or volume of shots. More transparent means fewer shots, more intense color indicates more shots. Clearly here in this chart, the basket or the rim is really popular, and then it fades out to more density after the three-point line. You also often see this type of chart applied to things other than shots, like turnover locations, for instance, or maybe pass location, origin, or destination. And this is the last type of chart that I want to show you. This is the hexbin shot chart. And this kind of chart does two things pretty well. It uses the size of hexagons to indicate volume and color to denote efficiency. We'll get more into that next, but for now, that's defined basically as evaluation on the rate of success. This chart specifically, I think, is really associated with the basketball analytics movement, thanks to Kirk Goldsberry, who is a former Harvard cartography professor and VP at the San Antonio Spurs. He's really responsible for first mapping basketball shots in this way and really popularizing it as a tool of analysis and communication. He actually has a book about this from a couple of years ago called Sprawl Ball that has a lot of great illustrations and personally is a fun way to introduce your job to the people in your life, like my mom, who refer to basketball as the old leather pumpkin. For the rest of the talk, we're going to be looking at these two types of charts, the heat map and the hexbin. And both of these charts have different but complementary functions. Both are actually using the same shot chart data here, but the hexbin doesn't have quite the fidelity for volume that the contour chart does. And the contour chart doesn't have any value judgment on the shots. It's purely descriptive. So if we look at this player here, you'll see that he's especially effective from the right corner where all of those bright red hexes are. And he takes relatively more shots there. But here at the top left, he takes even more shots, but it isn't quite as good. You don't quite see that as much in the hexbin, but if you have the heat chart as a complement, it's much more obvious. All right, so let's talk about efficiency. I keep saying that word, but what does it mean? There are a couple ways to talk about the value of a shot. There's simple field goal percentage, that's straight up number of shots divided by number of shots attempted, but that doesn't really take into account that 3 is greater than 2. And that's where effective field goal percentage comes in. Say you take 2 sets of 10 shots, one from 2 and one from 3. If you make 6 shots from 2, you'll have scored 12 points. But you only need 4 shots from 3 to add up to 12. Turn that into possessions, like the amount of time that you're on the court, the times that you have the ball, and it really adds up. Effective field goal percentage is actually what we'll use to color efficiency in shot charts here, but I want to also lightly touch on two other things. True shooting is a way to value shots that are fouled. So in basketball, if there's a shooting foul, you'll get a compensatory free throw. If the shot's made, then you'll get 1 free throw, and if it's missed, then you'll get 2 or 3 free throws, depending on where the foul occurred. Then there's points per possession, which takes into account not just the shot, but the value of a possession, taking into account offensive rebounds. Like if a shot gets blocked at the rim, there's a good chance you get the rebound, same possession, new shot. I want to point out briefly this 0.44 coefficient in both true shooting and points per possession. This convention is for estimating the total number of possessions that a player is involved in. That includes and ones, technical free throws, flagrant foul free throws, and 3-point free throws, 3 in a row. But hold on, didn't I just tell you all that we had all the player tracking data since 2013? So we do know the actual number of free throw possessions and can calculate the real true shooting percentage on the fly. I think that it's still like pretty consistently close. But this number, if you look up how to write these formulas on the internet, that's how it'll be described. So these calculations of efficiency, effective field goal percentage, true shooting percentage, points per possession are all super important for underscoring the high effort, low reward nature of a mid-range shot versus a three-point shot, which is kind of the theme of the three-point revolution. So I'm going to talk about how 3 is greater than 2. I mean, this seems pretty obvious, right? Like, that's just arithmetic, but it's actually what is most closely associated with basketball analytics movements. And this idea that it's just about like, oh, well, they should just shoot more threes. Like, how obvious is that? There's a bit of hostility in some parts of the basketball world against applying analytics to the game. Like Charles Barkley, for instance, has a couple of colorful, famous quotes about, I will not quote here, that outline just how little time he has for analytics. But what I'll try to show you is that this trend is real, but 3 being greater than 2 is a bit more nuanced than straight up figures. So it turns out that the three-point line wasn't always a thing in professional basketball. In 1979, the NBA installed a dividing arc 23 feet 9 inches from the basket at its apex and breaking at 22 feet at the corners, where all shots were made above this line would be worth 3 points. And as you can see, there was a lot of initial skepticism, like maybe this was a gimmick. For the first 10 or so years of its existence, no more than 1 in 10 shots in a game were made from 3. Since then, it's been cooler and cooler to shoot from 3. There was another experiment from the 1994 to 1996 seasons where the line was shortened to be uniformly 22 feet from the basket. And then after play-by-play is introduced, it's steadily more popular. And then it really jumps in the past decade, coinciding with all NBA teams getting player tracking data in 2013. Here, I want to point out that the rate at which teams actually make their three-point shots hasn't dramatically changed in the past several years in the same way that their attempts have gone up. Teams aren't necessarily getting better at making threes in the aggregate, they're getting better at attempting them. So let's look at the league. In 2013, when this 3 trend is already fairly healthy, we see that around 49,000 shots were from 3, accounting for approximately 24.3% of all shots. There's still a lot of blue hexagons and gray fill here in both charts in the mid-range and on the contour chart. Fast forward to last year, where 78,000 shots were from 3, accounting for 35.9% of all shots, a jump in share of over 10%. And we can readily see that in both charts too. There's so much more white space, especially right at the dividing line from 2 to 3. If a 3 is just a step or 2 back from a long 2, why not take the more valuable shot? This is even more dramatic if you look at a team level. In 2013, this team took a lot of bad mid-range shots, but in 2019, shots were more densely concentrated from 3 or at the rim. And I want to be cautious now about associating this strictly with the strong current of three-point attempts. This shot profile is also influenced by coaching changes and changes in players and strategy, but they all play in the same league. Shot charts display outcomes, not process, but teams are playing different processes to achieve those outcomes. And the process for generating more looks from 3 has meant more spacing of players, more attacking the rim for defensive collapse and passing out. Defenses try to take away both the rim and the 3, i.e. try to force the low return mid-range shot, but in general, they tend to get overextended. So the ripple effect is that defenses have to abandon how closely they're defending the rim. So offensive efficiency has gone up over this time period, not only because teams are shooting more threes, but also because the shot percentage at the rim is also going up. All right, so let's look at a couple applications of shot charts. This first example is of a player who completely changed his game in the course of 4 seasons to adapt to this prevailing trend of 3. In the first year here, he took only 13 shots from 3, and he didn't make very many of them. But gradually, he's taking fewer and fewer shots from mid-range and more from above the break. After 4 seasons, he's taken 512 shots from 3, making them at 36.5%, essentially league average. But all threes aren't created equal for him. As this player develops his three-point shot, he's mostly successful from the corners. Here in year 4 at the wing, the top right above the break for the corner, it looks like he takes a pretty high volume of shots, but he isn't making very many of them. This player in year 2 and 3 actually already has a pretty decent three-point percentage, but he's taking a bit more than half of what he does in year 4. And that translates to a lot fewer points. That brings us to where shots come from when they're 4-3. If you look at a lot of shot charts, you'll start to notice that the corners tend to light up bright red. There's so much so that people talk about getting the good corner 3. It's one of the best shots you can take because they're worth 3 points and people tend to make them more often, almost 40% of the time. So there are two things going on here that you might ask. One, why don't you just always take them from the corners if they're better? And two, what about the corners makes them so good? And both of these things are kind of tied together. So let's start with just the volume. Looking at this table from 2019, you see that all the three-pointers taken, the majority of them are taken above the break where the corner line meets the arc, 16,000 more. And why that happens is probably related in some ways to why corner threes tend to go in more often. If you look at the simple geometry of the court, you see one thing right away. The corners are closer. And remember from those 3 seasons in the mid-90s where the distance to the basket was changed to be 22 feet all around, same as the current distance from the corners? So it's closer, sure. And this is actually the premise that was the addition for the three-point line. The reasoning was the further away it is, the harder it should be, right? So it should be rewarded with more points. But we don't just play basketball like it's the all-star three-point contest. There are going to be a lot of typically large people in between you, the shooter, and making that shot. So actually, how you get the ball matters quite a bit and how defenses can cover you. These shots from the corner in general tend to be assisted, meaning you receive the ball from a pass, a catch and shoot situation rather than off the dribble, where you run with the ball to a space on the floor and then take the shot. How defenses can be set, how closely a defender can get to you in order to contest your shot, all of that factors in. So it's a question both of court geography and context. So far, I think I've tried to persuade you all that abandoning the mid-range and going for three is really maybe the best or most efficient way to win, back to 3 being inherently greater than 2. And sometimes this argument is spun on its head as being reductive, like basketball analytics is only saying to do this. But I don't actually think that this is such a simple proposition because players have different skill sets, different things that they're good at, and really the best way to win is to maximize those abilities and put that into the alchemy of making a great team. The three-point revolution is the prevailing trend in the league, but players individually aren't averages. There are many paths to success. So these are all shot charts of different players who have above average efficiency and fairly diverse shot profiles. You can see that 2 on the top right and 1 on the bottom left, like they still take a prodigious amount of mid-range shots. I think I just have one center here on the top left. This is kind of the prototypical big man shot chart. But if you remember the first story I told you about the player who completely transformed his game, he was a center too. So traditionally, charts have corresponded to certain positions, but now more creative use of positions has turned more towards role-based strategy basketball. So it used to be that the role of a shooter and a floor spacer, like our first example, that was usually the smallest guy. And then the role of an offensive rebounder was usually the biggest guy, and that is typically not a shooting guard. But now I wouldn't say that shot charts are necessarily descriptive of a player position, so you do need to be careful. So I want to end shortly on something I've been alluding to throughout this talk, which is the shortcomings of shot charts. Namely, you can't visualize everything. And to bring it back full circle to our discussion of the data sources in basketball, from the box score to the play-by-play to player tracking, I think that shot charts, as good as they are as showing in a really compelling, attractive way the location and volume and value of a shot, at the end of the day, it's still a shot. It's still outcome-based, not necessarily process-based. And of course, we could certainly slice the data here in certain ways, like show me only shots that were contested or ones that came off the pick and roll. But ultimately, there's a lot of the story to these shots that isn't told and can't be told by this type of visualization. So these two shot charts, they look kind of similar, right? Like mirror images, at least after the three-point line, but they're not telling the story of how the player got those shots. These look like the same shots, but they're not necessarily. So shot charts can be deceptive. We don't know the speed in which he got the shot off or how he got that shot or the distance between him and his defender. So I think that we always have to be really careful about when we look at shot charts to make sure we're applying them in a responsible, correct way that doesn't mislead or elide the full story. They're just another tool in the toolbox, although one of the more beautiful ones. And so on that note, I think I will take some questions if there are any. Thank you very much. And I believe I'm bringing it up from a doc. Okay. So one of the rules for me is that I cannot talk about teams, specific teams or players, or this season. So usually asking questions can get a little tricky. I'm going to start with, do you further extend these visualizations into prediction or scenario analysis? Yes. So we generate these charts often when we're asking a specific question, and there are two applications for them. One is for our own purposes, if we're trying to investigate a question, and then the other is whether we're trying to communicate something, whether it's to coaching staff, front office staff, of some aspect of a player. Like I was saying, that it's definitely a tool in the toolbox, but not the only one. And we're very careful about not using them in isolation ever. Okay. Do you have a different way of analyzing 2 points versus 3 points in clutch time comparing to general analysis? Yes. And that's all I can tell you. Yes, we do. Were there any challenges initially for teams to incorporate data analytics into their strategies? Yeah, so it's like the Tolstoy story where, how does it go? It's like all happy families are alike, all unhappy families are different in their own way. Like all teams are unhappy in their own way when it comes to their data teams, and it's kind of like our data team doesn't look like most other NBA analytics teams, just in terms of size or data prerogatives. So I think that the biggest challenge for our team specifically, and maybe just the basketball analytics community in general, is making sure that of all the fun stuff that we do with answering cool questions and having fun learning what we want to know about basketball using data, is making sure that we provide it in a way where the people who do make decisions, one, can parse it, and two, will be interested in hearing it. It's probably going to be a very short conversation if you're going to be talking to a coach about, like, well, I use this very specific model to build our shot model. Like, he's not going to care. He wants to know, like, okay, how do I use this information? And I only have 10 minutes. So that's one of the trickier parts. And it's also an advantage of the visualization work that we do, because pictures tell 1,000 words. And that kind of leads into this next question. You mentioned that you use D3 for analysis. Can you explain more on the advantages of using it? That's a platform specific answer. I just find that the way that we provide information, having something that's interactive and will rapidly generate on a platform that's accessible to everybody within our organization is more effective. Do you happen to explore or visualize the successful field goal attempts for left or right-handed player in corner 3? Yes, we do. That's what I was talking about, of like, we can further slice this data. I'm actually not allowed to show you anything deeper than the holistic shot charts, but yeah, we would just filter by the handedness of a player. And like that also has to do with like how effective is your pass, like who's your passer. Next question is, for people looking for a career shift, do you think domain knowledge is a hurdle or key to success for data science scientists in a specific field or industry? So my background is not at all in basketball. And to be completely frank, when I first interviewed for this job, I had to look up how many players were on a basketball team. I was a fairly avid sports fan, but not basketball specifically. And I found that because I was coming from a technical background, that I was used to talking to people who were very technical and trying to translate that to people who maybe weren't as technical. That was a bigger asset. But I would also say that attitude is very uncommon. Like I would say that that's particular to the Sixers organization. I think in general, teams tend to select for basketball knowledge or basketball work on the front end. So like I know several people who have gotten jobs because they had a large Twitter presence or basketball analytics blog presence, and then decided to go work in-house for a team. But the thing about that is you get used to answering the questions that you want to answer and having an audience. And then once you start working for a team, there's very, very little that you can share. So it's, yeah, kind of pick your poison. But it is very fun working for a basketball team when it's not COVID. And I actually took the opportunity to dress up as if I were going to a game, hopefully next month. I think this is the last question. Follow up on the tools. What are your 2 to 4 favorite tools to use and recommend for data visualization? Oh man, that one's tough because if we're doing a quick analysis, we would probably just do it with Matplotlib. But D3 is so nice for the recruiting of the people that you need to look at these visualizations and to look at the charts and the shot charts and whatever, to get them engaged. I just think that the interactive capability of it is so powerful because you can be precise, but you can also guide the storytelling. All right, well, that's it, I think.
Awesome. Tegan, thank you so much. I know it's hard to navigate. You can't answer every single question because you're not allowed. So we appreciate you answering what you could, and your talk was truly a slam dunk. So thank you.
Love it.
Really, really enjoyed it. So thank you.
Thank you.
If we get any other questions, we'll be sure to pass them along to you later in the day. So again, thank you so much.